Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us today for our hands-on lab, anomaly detection model, optimization, and LandingLens with our very own Erica Gilbert, Customer Success Engineer. With that, Erica, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to wave and show my face right here at the start, and then I'll go off camera. But welcome to our hands-on lab. I'm looking forward to walking you through leveraging our recently released anomaly detection model. So today's agenda, we will do sort of a high-level overview and review some example use cases across different industries, look at some process considerations for where and when anomaly detection is best leveraged. We'll discuss some best practices for both working within LandingLens and then how you might work to optimize your data for anomaly detection. And then I'll be in the platform walking through two different models and developing them directly in LandingLens. And then we'll save time, of course, for questions. And Grace or Adrian, if you could take the link here for the anomaly detection data sets and place it in the chat. Those that don't have existing anomaly data sorted into normal or abnormal, they can go ahead and download this data set here. We do also offer a sample project within LandingLens, so you're able to leverage that as well to follow along in this hands-on lab today. But if you don't want to use the screw, then there's quite a breadth of different anomaly detection data in this MV Tech AD resource. So at the core of our anomaly detection model, it's a diffusion-based architecture. This means the model understands what's different from normal by reconstructing what it expects to see based on the data that you've used to identify what normal is in its training. And then, of course, it highlights the differences sort of between. This is a subtle yet powerful design. Makes it really particularly well suited for identifying visual anomalies, even in cluttered or complex images. So from a research perspective here at LandingLens, we spent about 6 months over 2 different efforts looking at various approaches that are considered state-of-the-art to incorporate into Lens. And we tested that across industry standard data sets for glass and MV Tech, and then our own internal data sets. And when we felt that it was performing well, we of course then incorporated it as a project type into LandingLens. Some of the key benefits are that you can leverage only normal images in your training selection, though it is helpful, as you'll see in our best practice, to have some abnormal data that you include to help tune the model's threshold in identifying abnormal from normal. So how do you actually leverage this model in the wild? So here's some high value use cases. Manufacturing is often very common place to start looking at anomaly detection because, as many are aware, when you work in a manufacturing environment, you typically actually have less representative data of what is defects is. Often those defects are rare. For one use case, thinking about different surface defects, which is a very common use case, regardless of the material you're inspecting, where, in this example here, we're looking at hose, you're able to detect, tears in those hoses before they ship out. So before there is a complaint filed from the end customer. Prior to leveraging an anomaly detection model, this relied on manual inspection, or in some cases, sensors that can miss subtle details and issues. Leveraging AI really provides consistent real-time anomaly detection that allows you to stop the line or perform different next step actions that might be either more critical defects or less critical. Then also looking at medical imaging, another industry that has a wealth of images available. Here you can actually flag abnormal chest X-rays, and this can help prioritize the attention to that individual. And this can be super beneficial if you think about the different healthcare settings that exist today. Many have low resource available or low training. So you can actually do a first pass by submitting that imagery through an AI model to identify for abnormalities. And then, long term, you can look to investigate other diagnostics that are deeper in sort of understanding what type of abnormality actually exists in that chest x-ray. But this really allows clinicians to prioritize attention and do sort of an initial first assessment. When we look at other applications across different industries, we see that pop up in surveillance. This actually could be both agriculture or direct in facilities. We see that in also agriculture quality control, and then also in retail. So just doing sort of final packaging check. All of these are sort of critical early alert systems that help the human in their visual inspections. It's hard for someone to do any kind of continual monitoring. So to be able to react earlier, or if you're missing subtle early signs, has a lot of value, in the fire and smoke detection example, really supporting faster emergency response. And for the food sorting, it really allows more precise and consistent sorting. And then ultimately for final packaging check, allowing for almost full automation in this process. The devil is in the details and how ultimately you implement anomaly detection. So it is not magic. It is a tool. It works best when it's framed as part of a process. It's particularly strong as a first pass screen or a second set of eyes, or potentially when you're just gathering data for research and downstream analysis, where it isn't a direct impact to critical next steps. It's important to remember that what is statistically different or unique in an image may not always equal practical issues. We really have to understand the business decision for why you're leveraging an anomaly detection model and make sure that makes sense for your particular use case. The business context is more important than sort of the statistical, perhaps interesting data around anomalies. It's also important to know that what's abnormal may shift across teams or time. So it's important to think about iteration and that the strategy for implementation should account for subjectivity and what was sort of used to show the model what was normal. That's super important. And then, how the model is interpreting and how much variation is set up and available as part of your existing application, and how much maybe that could tolerate or ultimately change. So when we think about some best practice mechanisms that are available as part of the platform, one that comes up commonly is working with the anomaly threshold itself. So if you include images in your initial model training in the dev set, will help identify an anomaly threshold that has the best sort of trade-off for performance and accuracy. But you can also adjust this yourself. You could ultimately shift the threshold, say from a default like 0.46, and that might catch more true positives, but it might also raise the false positives. So you want to understand in the context of your application, what's worse, a missed defect or a false alarm. And you'll see in the walkthrough how we can introduce some adjustments there to tolerate more or less based on our end use case. In addition, you also want to understand how you are working with your data. And commonly, a lot of what you can do to optimize the anomaly detection model is pre-processing your data before it even gets into LandingLens. Currently, we resize images to 480 by 480. This is actually a little larger than most of the industry standard anomaly detection models available. So if you have use cases where you have very large images, you want to ensure that you're pre-processing so that you have at least 5 pixels of what you're looking to identify available in the training image. And then, of course, there's all sorts of cropping. So if you have consistent images and you really want to focus in a specific area, you can reduce the impact of the background that might be, if the background ultimately changes and that, then is impacting identifying something as abnormal. You can also do tests to understand the color space transformation. Some anomalies may be more visible in those different color spaces. I'm sure if you're working with any type of metal, you might have experimented in capturing those surface defects in the different maybe RGB or HSV spaces. But there's a list here also just of many others. If there's lighting, you may want to do some normalization across your data set, or look at bringing in lighting, adjusting for contrast or filtering. You have a variable environment where the image capture is not consistent, but what you're looking to have analyzed is you can use an object detection model developed in LandingLens to find that area of interest and then pass the bounding box contents to that anomaly detection model. We also offer heat map capabilities. So this is helpful just to understand and increase trust in what your model is understanding is unique or abnormal on the different images. This is a pretty blown up image of a pill dataset available from MBTech that we'll look at today. But the idea is that it informs the model has a good understanding of what is different and unique in the images that are alerted as abnormal. And this is a very helpful cue for how you can optimize your model's understanding if there are areas sort of the model is ultimately missing. The model won't give a precise bounding box, but it's very important for interpretability and trust. Some other notes around the setup for this particular project and model type in LandingLens. There is a training limit of 1,000 images. The images are resized, so do pre-process to ensure you get good visual understanding or pixels representing of what you want to identify. And note that only normal images are included in training. So if you load any abnormal images and you click just the auto train button, those images of abnormal will only be included in dev splits. And it's always a good practice to include a distribution across tests as well. So if you have available of both abnormal and normal, you can include those in the test set. And I'll show you that in the walkthrough. This model type currently doesn't offer custom training. If you have specific requirements around your use case where you think this might be valuable, we'd love to talk to you about it and understand. What we've seen is that, number one, we have a very high learning cycle that's configured automatically for this model type. So it will go through a maximum of 100, and hopefully what we've seen is that with all of our tests, the model is not gaining any new understanding, so has a good opportunity to learn. So you don't need to customize the number of epochs or epochs included. And then also just looking at adjusting for different augmentations may be short-circuiting or not really directly analogous to what you're seeing in real world. So we really want you to focus on assembling the best data set possible rather than using augmentations that might not really reflect real world scenarios. We will be updating our Python library to support anomaly detection in the future, but today you can still deploy with the inference API, which I'll show you in the walkthrough. But we also support for the edge, both our landing edge and Docker implementations. So ensure that you update to the latest version to ensure this model type is supported at the edge. This is what you'll see at the end as we go through our walkthrough and hands-on development in the LandingLens platform today. It shows the JSON output via our inference API. The really key details are at the top where you get the prediction details and the confidence score. And then if you're incorporating that into different systems, the label index for sort of abnormal, normal here would be 0. And then you also get information on the processing details. And then for model versioning, you have your model ID key here at the bottom. Pretty simple payload given an image and ultimately a response. So now we'll pivot towards the walkthrough. And you can use your own current projects or the available sample data project. And again, if you even just search Kaggle MV Tech, you'll find it's a pretty comprehensive of at least 10 different types of anomaly data sets with varying amounts of data. For our purposes today, we'll go through 2 ways of accessing and loading data: performing training, reviewing those results, and then testing inference. the goal is really to demystify the end-to-end process of developing an anomaly detection model and give you some confidence in optimizing your own anomaly detection workflow. All right, so now ultimately we'll be in the platform, and you can see I have a number of different projects already created, and you can see sort of the distribution across different spectrums working with data, so both RGB and black and white, but we also have some thermal imagery and also X-ray imagery. So working with the anomaly detection model supports a variety across the spectrum of image data, not unstructured data. But we also support different types of use cases. You do see that these are all very consistent images, but if you look at, this is being used maybe for different parts of an inspection process. So here looking at sort of the final state for screws, but doing analysis on material, here being leather, or sort of the array of defects that might appear on pills, especially given that the pill themselves has quite a bit of inherent variation that ultimately tolerated. And here's just a reminder there of the Kaggle resource if you'd like to download your own dataset. So what I'll do now is actually first leverage the new model type. So I'll create a project, very simple. And you can see I have the option either to click at the bottom for more upload options, would allow me to sort my folders, or I can actually load sample data. So we have a project pre-prepped for you to add just some understanding of what ultimately you're working with. And then it's the same process as normal, where you would go through as typical, where you're going through and labeling the images based on your subject matter understanding of that data. So again, one of the key best practices is to ensure those who have that sense of truth are the ones who do this consistently, working with assigning your distribution. So ensuring that consistency. Our best practice is to start smaller rather than with a high volume of images of normal, but really look at what is the variation expected and make sure that you have a starting point of 50 examples of what the normal distribution looks like. And then it's just as simple as clicking the train button. Though once you've labeled all your data, it is a good practice to set up a split that will reserve some of that data for only the test split. So you can see in this case, I've labeled 4 and 6 here. And then I can adjust what percentage I want to reserve for dev and test. So in this case, you can see 50% of that 6 would be used to help fine-tune the anomaly threshold. And then 50% of this data would be used purely to understand how well the model understood what normal ultimately was. But you can also adjust the distribution you want just based on the amount of data you may have for a 70-20-10. But I highly encourage everyone to always use the test split. The default train option will split into train and dev only. So I would click assign that split. And then because there's no custom training, I would just hit this train button. And we would take care of the infrastructure and everything that happens behind the scenes to operationalize your model. We'll perform the learning cycles to help understand, all of the variation of ultimately what normal is. And we'll perform those metrics. So the same net of what you're used to working with in LandingLens, but here applied for only 2 class types of normal or abnormal. So we're going to fast forward a little bit here. So this you can see is the finalized result of that initial model. In this case, we actually labeled all full set of the data that's provided, both 15 normal and 5 abnormal. And again, you can see that abnormal imagery is only used in the dev split. And here we have some good test metrics here that's helps inform how this might perform in a real world scenario. You also have the opportunity to review the heat map after the model is trained. So you can see here, we have a nice distribution here of normal versus abnormal. And we can see for the normal images, the model is focused learning sort of the main screw area. But for the abnormal, what is highlighting here is really that key feature of difference between the original normal images. So this is a good indicator that this model is understanding the task at hand pretty well. And there's a lot of variation in how sort of the screw here is set up and how it's sort of turned. So the model is having to learn that distribution of what normal ultimately is like. But now I'll create that process with another sample set of data, this time including our pill defects, which is available from the MVTech data set. So here you see we have options to upload normal and upload abnormal. So I'm going to click the upload normal option. Oops. And in this case, I'm just going to grab 25 normal, and I can preview, what that looks like here. All of my normal images are loaded. And now I can go and navigate to my abnormal images. And let's just say for our purposes here of loading data all together, I have actually a very good, healthy representation of what's abnormal. So now those labels will be auto-applied as the data is loading into the platform. We go through a similar process. It's always good to visually review these as they're coming through, because you can sanity check that you do actually agree that it's abnormal, and also that it is normal. So we could probably actually use more normal data, and you'll see when I hit the fast forward button for this particular project that we've ultimately added more data. But same process of assigning split here. I always typically select for what the platform magically provides as best practice. And then I would perform and hit my train button here and get the model going. We'll pull that cake out of the oven, and we see we have a distribution of 392 images. Now we have much more volume and representation of what normal looks like, and 124 that are abnormal. But we didn't use all of the normal just for the training. We also used it for 2 different test sets to help identify how this might perform in real world scenarios. So we can see that we actually have many different model versions here. So all the same capabilities for the other projects and LandingLens to be able to compare different model versions or add different evaluation sets is all available in the platform. But interestingly, I see I have my set of data here that is my golden test set. So these were not used in any of the train process. So it's just completely held out. You could see I could do my comparison here directly between these 2 versions. But I'm more just interested in looking at maybe I could adjust or fine tune the anomaly threshold to help optimize this for my particular use case. So in this case, I would click adjust here. And I'm interested if I go up to 36% here. So actually, here I actually want to be more precise. So let me adjust this, I think. Yeah, this actually is closer in line with, I want to target higher precision, and I'm okay if we have higher false positive rate. So I'm going to generate this new report. And then now I know ultimately when I deploy my model, that'll reflect more of my targets for my particular surface inspection of these individual pills. So now I see that separate anomaly configuration here. And the model is actually generating, but you deploy the same way you would any other model in LandingLens. So you click the deployment button, and then you give your endpoint a name. It's important this name, it does not, you're not able to edit the endpoint name. So think about how you want to title, be very generic or very prescriptive, just depending, because you can actually deploy each of these versions to that endpoint. I'm gonna hit the deploy button. Now I see my cloud option, mobile inference available, but importantly, I also have my curl command here that I can use to run that inference API. So I'm gonna copy this code, and then I'm gonna come to my deployment test environment, which I use Postman for. Of course, long-term, you would set up a pipeline to programmatically work with this. So I'm going to import those details here. You can see my endpoint ID is available. That's what the string sort of looks like for the post URL. But importantly, I also need to bring in my API key that authorizes me to leverage the LandingLens API. So I'm just grabbing that key from the platform. This is my specific one for this organization 925. And I'm going to come back to my Postman and paste that API key. And then I'm going to run that inference. So I'm going to select an image that's here directly on my machine. And we actually want to select a relevant image. That's for a metal casting model. Here's my test image. And I'm going to send that request. And so you'll see the same payload that we walked through in the slides showcase here. And just so you get a sense of what image is being sent, you can see this image here has a very large chip here on the side. So it is abnormal. And the model is predicting that correctly. It does give a lower score than potentially we'd like. So perhaps we'd explore adjusting the confidence threshold of the model. Again, you can iterate over time based on your individual application. Here you've seen two different use cases with a model trained ultimately in LandingLens to understand the distribution of normal across variation, deployed, and then actually run inference on that all within LandingLens. Super rapid, but importantly, configurable and iteratable capabilities with anomaly detection. So now I'll turn it over to any questions that may be percolating within the crowd.
Thank you, Erica, for a great session. And thank you, everyone, for submitting your questions. We've got quite a bit, so let's start. First question, how is it ensured that the algorithm is compliant and meets regulatory requirements?
So usually all customers who are working with our models have to go through their own testing and compliance processes for implementing models. So there may be repeatability tests where you work with similar sets of data and the model gives consistent, reliable results. And that should ensure that you're able to meet those compliance standards. Your organization also, typically when they onboard and work with a company like LandingAI, they would go through those compliance processes and identify what type of model infrastructure, in this case, it's non-generative AI. It might help speed up some of those implementation questions within the organization. But these are all state-of-the-art models that we've optimized for inclusion, not only in our platform, but also just based on our own research. So if there's a specific compliance concern that you have, we'd be happy to discuss in more detail about your use case and how you're looking to implement.
And the follow-up part of that was, what algorithm is being used?
So we've tested a wide variety of different algorithms. We did some sort of single shot learning techniques early on. We also had a previous implementation with PatchCore for anomaly detection. But in this case, we're using RD. So that is a residual difference model, particularly the acronym is RD480, residual difference for anomaly detection. If you're in the platform, and I'll show you this briefly, you can actually see for all of the models that exist in the platform, what is being used behind the scenes based on the training information available. So here we see 160 million hyperparameter RD480. And again, those learning cycles here up to 100, though we will, if the model should be in the validation chart here, that list of the number of epochs. If the model is not learning, we will stop the training process once it's reached its sort of saturation point.
Excellent. Next question. For cropping pre-processing, could we crop instead of crop out?
I'm not sure I understand. You could definitely focus on a region of interest that is a consistent crop sort of in. Usually you're narrowing focus, but it could be any section of the image. Or you could be using pre-processing to do tiling of much larger images as well. Hopefully that addresses your question.
Great. Next one. Is this agent workflow or agentic AI?
No, this is not agentic. This is using an unsupervised model to understand distribution of normal. But you may be implementing this with agentic tools in your own workflows or by leveraging our vision agent itself. So there's ways to connect the inference API to your anomaly detection model.
Next question. Can the anomaly detection be exported and embedded into an app, or does it require to be run in the cloud?
So we do offer edge deployment. We provide that through our Docker container, or you can leverage LandingEdge. This sort of allows you to minimize the pipeline effort for working with our different models. So it is a model bundle that you download, and then you load and run inference with either the Docker container or LandingEdge. So absolutely, you can run offline.
Next question. If the data is labeled, then is it supervised learning?
It's technically considered an unsupervised approach because we're not using multiple labels here in the model itself. So I guess you would technically say it's semi-supervised, if that answers your question.
Is there a ratio of images for anomaly detection? Example, 80% normal, 20% abnormal.
That's a good ratio to start with for sure. And again, the model isn't learning on or training on abnormal. It's only training on normal. So any abnormal data that you have just helps us auto-select a anomaly threshold. So some more of the distribution of abnormal can help with that, but you also have the power to adjust that yourself. You can actually train with no abnormal data included at all, but 80-20 is a good standard ratio.
This is a subset of that other question. You may have already answered this in a previous question, but let me just go ahead and read it. If you upload normal and abnormal data separately and label them as such, is it no longer unsupervised learning? Does it become supervised learning?
Yeah, I think that sort of the technical answer is this is a semi-supervised approach. It's unsupervised in that you're loading data and the model is identifying what to interpret as normal versus not normal. So that's what the term around unsupervised means. But it doesn't really matter whether you're loading the data and labeling it normal, or then you train the model and then you stop and then add abnormal and see the predicted value against the initial model. Again, the abnormal images are only used to do threshold selection and test the model's understanding of normal.
Next question. How many images are augmented from the original images that are provided?
I don't believe we're doing any augmentation on the data that's being loaded into the platform. So the data used that you identify as normal is the only training data. It is going through different epochs, so up to 100, but I'll double check that with other MLEs on our team and just verify. But I don't believe that we're using any augmentation to enhance your data.
Excellent. How many images are needed to have the best training?
This is why we welcome an iterative approach. In ideal conditions, you want to start sort of small. So start with 50 normal, and you can think about that as roughly 10 images that represent the best case scenario, clean, well lit, perfectly positioned. And then also a set of 10 images that are maybe just outside of normal but are acceptable. So variations in lighting, minor cosmetic differences, or maybe slight differences in positioning. And then abnormal, you want to use at least one, but ideally 10 that identify, so that you get to that sort of total of 50, both abnormal and normal. But more normal is helpful to start. And then based on the model's understanding, you can adjust your approach in the future. But starting small helps you root out where the model is having trouble in understanding that distribution of normal. And doing that with smaller sets of data is a lot easier than very high volume. It also ensures that everyone agrees that what you've included for normal is accurate. A lot of times if it's a higher volume of data, you may not really have that true sense of ground truth.
Next question. Is anomaly threshold found out by trial and error method?
So the selection that we auto-identify is sort of based on the delta of highest accuracy. So it's minimizing errors in false positives or false negatives. But you can select your own threshold based on your use case. So you may have a higher false alarm tolerance in your application and prefer the human to review each of those rather than a much higher precision goal.
Next question. Do you have the model context protocol in the LandingAI for connecting to an LLM?
So if you'd like to explore working with a multimodal approach with LLMs, I'd encourage you to try out Vision Agent. So va.landing.ai. And that would allow you to assemble agentic workflows where we have incorporated state-of-the-art open source models that are curated specifically for primarily vision tasks. And then we also offer in that same suite and visual AI sort of platform tooling capabilities that are proprietary to us around document understanding with our agentic document extraction API. And then we also offer agentic object detection API. So if you're looking to explore how to interact and use an LLM to have understanding in your imagery, that's the platform to check out. And I'll just pull it up here so that so this would allow you to work with our different APIs. So you can see text to object detection, working with sort of prompting here, text to segmentation, but also more traditional machine vision capabilities like OCR, and then of course our own proprietary tools that allow you to pull meaning and both visual understanding with both image data and text data in documents.
Great. Next one is, what model architectures are available and how do we know which ones we are using?
So for LandingLens today, we offer 4 different model types. They're all deep learning based. So whether that's a transformer or a CNN, we expose what those model types are in the custom training selection option. So you can see whether you're using a seg former model or connext for classification. Part of what's beneficial for working with LandingAI is that we are benchmarking and folding into the platform what we see as most performant so that that infrastructure is available out of the gate for you in LandingLens. And then also with the agentic suite, again, there is that full set of APIs that we are curating and optimizing, but you can see they're pretty common. So we have Florence. We also have some zero-shot learning, and here some VIT capabilities, some SAM incorporation. But what we're including is highly visible. And then if there's something you'd like to have available as well, we'd love to hear your feedback on what other visual AI tools and models you'd like incorporated.
Excellent. We have time for just 3 more questions. Can I use LandingLens to perform anomaly detection in connected and autonomous vehicles?
I'd be interested to understand the use case of what you're trying to detect as anomalous, but there should be no reason why you wouldn't be able to take your model and deploy at the edge, or if the vehicle has some connectivity capability to run that through the inference API.
Next, last question. What is the difference between anomaly and intrusion detection?
You could use an anomaly model to identify for intrusion. So just depending on the scene and analysis, if what is abnormal in this case is an intrusion, you could train on what non-intrusion looks like. So you can leverage an anomaly detection model for an intrusion application, but it is not an intrusion model type itself.
And just 2 more questions. Can the app be adapted to work with time series data?
So for LandingLens, if you have time series data, there's typically a visual representation of that output. And that could be a abnormal or normal view. You could load that into LandingLens and create a model. So there would be some pre-processing and some post-processing to apply that logic wherever this use case might be analyzing data, but absolutely. But today we don't have time series specific, so where it's working with those direct inputs in LandingLens.
Let me just share this one last question. We had a lot of great questions. If we didn't hit them today, we will definitely do a follow-up with with all the great attendees tomorrow. The last question is, where is the use case for this tablet abnormality? In a tablet manufacturing line or post-manufacturer quality inspection or other?
So you can actually use an anomaly detection model probably in all of those steps. So it depends on who's implementing and where they're looking to identify issues. And if that's before sort of final completion, I imagine they're quite a different set of components comprised in the tablet. So you could use that as part of the assembly process and then also the final assembly. So it could be many different anomaly detection models working to help optimize and automate identifying issues for tablets.
Excellent. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Eric, any closing comments before we skedaddle?
No, it was great working with the audience today to go through this process. And I really look forward to the follow-up and understanding more about the individual use cases. Happy model developing.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for joining our hands-on lab today, and have a great rest of the week.